Hello and welcome to Nerdarchy, for nerds by nerds. I'm Nerd Steve, and today I'm joined by Nick Butler. How are you doing today, Nick?
I'm chilling, man. How you doing?
I caught you mid-tweet, my bad. I'm
yeah,
like, I hit the buttons already. We're in. Um,
I like literally just hit the button, man.
yeah. So I came across you on Twitter, and I saw the Tidebreaker RPG that's um it's coming to Kickstarter very soon, and I believe you have um the raw game up on your website
yeah,
as a
early access
as a
edition.
download that people can grab.
Yep.
So uh so people who aren't familiar with you, if you want to introduce yourself and kind of give like the elevator pitch.
Hey, I'm Nick Butler. You can find me on Twitter at Follow My Blade. I make a game called Tidebreaker. It is a cinematic tabletop RPG. Like we like to try to make things like just like the live action movies and stuff that you like, your James Bond, your Marvel, little bit of anime influence, Dragon Ball Z kind of stuff, right? But the game itself, it's a mix of like narrative mechanics and we like to blend that with some kind of more traditional-ish like combat stuff. And yeah, it's a blast. Check it out. It's on tiebreakerrpg.com. You can get the early access edition now. We'll be on Kickstarter on June 22nd. And come by the Twitter, say hi.
So is Tidebreaker a kind of like a rules light system, rules heavy, crunchy? How would you describe it to people?
I think we're more on the cusp of rules and medium. The basic rules are a couple of pages long. Like we use like a dice pool system. Successes are 4 or 5 sets on a d6. It's pretty easy to get into, but there's a lot of character options. So like you can build whatever you want. Like if you've played like Mutants and Masterminds or Besem or something like that, like you'll be familiar with this kind of like a la carte approach where it's just like, hey, I have an idea. Like, can I make it? Yes, you can. You just tell me what it looks like, and
So would
it's
you say
there.
that's a classless system?
Yes, absolutely classless. But we try to keep it classy.
Yeah. Is it a superhero game? Because I definitely a lot of comic book influences from the look of things.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Lots of heavy comic influence, but it's not specifically a superhero game. It's setting agnostic. So you can do superheroes easily. You could do spies. You can do pirates, ninjas, whatever, right? But we focus primarily on just delivering high octane action, right? So if it's stylized and just cool as hell, that's us, right? If you want to do like Borderlands, go for it. If you want to do something like The Matrix, go for it, right? You know, take your influences and the rules will pretty much stay out of your way as far as like what kind of genres you want to go for, but it's definitely geared towards pumping out like high action, very dramatic, like kind of games. You know what I mean?
What was your inspiration for coming up with Tidebreaker?
Well, funny story. It's one of my favorite questions. Actually, I get this a lot when I do interviews. I used to work for a publishing company called Smunchy Games. Great people. Smunchy met me on a Discord, and at the time, he had like some kid doing one of his games, and I'm like, dude, I'm like way better than this guy. And Smunchy's like, prove it, and I'm like, bet. But if I prove it, you got to hire me.
Hmm.
And so I won the bet.
Hmm.
And I pumped out the first version of Tiebreaker within like a month. Because I was like, just give me a month and I will blow this kid out the water, like I promised. Because like I was pretty cocky, like I'm very confident in my game design chops. I did all my homework for years before I started doing it. Like I was just reading the Forge, going through everybody's Twitter accounts, like Reddit, there's fucking Tumblr, like you name it. Like I was sitting there just reading blogs, like diving into the games and stuff. So it's like I have a pretty good idea of like what's been done ish, like as far as like the most popular stuff and like a
Hmm.
couple of like obscure titles. And so like I took that and I was like, I could do this. And here we are basically. I ended up getting the rights. I left Smudgy on good terms, and now we're trying to get this Kickstarter going.
Awesome. So, how did you get into gaming?
Oh man, like when I was about 8 years old, um, my mom's friend like donated a Nintendo to us, and then I was just like, wait, I can move the pictures.
Yeah, yeah.
This is amazing. And so like I came in via video games, and then eventually my mom was just like, hey, like have you want to play cards or something like that. So I picked up card games. Somewhere along the line, we went to the bookstore. There was like second edition D&D. There was like an adventures, like Redbot's introductory adventure thing. Like I ran that, and then I was like, whoa, so I can do the Nintendo stuff, but with dice. This is amazing.
Yeah.
And like I picked that up, started playing D&D for a little while. Then I kind of fell out of it because I was like DMing for just like my brother and sister, and like nobody else in the neighborhood like even knew what a D&D was, right? Uh,
Yeah.
so it was kind of hard to like keep players outside of the family. And my family was just like, we're not going to keep doing this. We've got other stuff to do, right? Um, so I
Brother
fell
and
out of it
sister,
for a
younger,
while.
older,
Yeah, they were younger. So like
easier to recruit that way.
yeah, like second edition, I was like I want to say like 11, 12 ish,
Yeah.
Like I kind of had the rules down, but not really. Like as well as like a 12-year-old can, right? Um
I have fond memories. I remember, and we can probably, at least for us and my friends, we could say rules, in quotes. So
yeah, but like around college I got back into tabletop RPGs via like one shots of like Werewolf, and then I found Aaron Clooney's Thrash. Um, Aaron can be found on Twitter at Nico Aaron.
what is that? I've never heard of that game.
Oh, Thrash is cool. It's like inspired by Mechton Z, I believe, but it was a really heavy anime focused game that took a little bit of like the old like White Wolf Street Fighter game
Okay.
and kind of like converted it a bit to so you could make like your custom characters like by making their special moves. So like if you wanted to make a dragon punch, you started off with rising uppercut, and then like you added like it's been like 10, 15 years since I played Thrash, but like you could add like flaming or something to that, and you could do like
Yeah.
Ken's fire dragon punch, right? But then I saw that and I was like, oh my god, I can make like any attack I want. And at that point, like all of the bells and whistles started going on in my head, right? And I was like, oh wait, he did this by himself? Like he didn't have a publishing company or nothing? Like
Yeah.
I can make my own. And at that point, I was like, dude, I want to make my own games. Like, this is awesome. Because, like, I wanted to make games, like video games and stuff, since I was a little kid. Um, but coding's hard and art is hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, like, tabletop RPGs is something that I'd already liked, but, like, it hadn't even dawned on me that, like, yeah, people, like, write these, right? Like, they're books. Like, you just gotta, like, make the mechanics and then get somebody else to do the art, you know. But yeah, Aaron pretty much kind of opened my eyes with just him being there, and he had Thrash. It was free. It was cool. It was fun. I had a whole bunch of people playing that for a little while. And then eventually, I ended up on Discord and Smunchy and blah blah blah.
Yeah. There's a. It sounds like it's that just a basically like a fighting game turned into an RPG.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, it's not so much focused on like the specifics of fighting game stuff. Like you're not gonna have like any like crazy combos in Thrash or anything like that.
Yeah.
Or like building like powers and mutants and masterminds or something like that. Where like you had like a modifier system
Yeah.
that attached itself to like
Where you can stack things together.
yeah, you
Yeah.
stack the things together and you get like the most pluses and effects as possible because it was like an effects based system, right? Um, So like you had a whole bunch of options to make like a whole bunch of cool things. Like there was a fighting game RPG that actually did cover a lot of like fighting game specific mechanics in RPG form, like called like best name ever, Fight the Fighting Game RPG
Perfect.
by Divine Madness Press. They just put out,
There's no guessing what that game was about. It's
oh
just
yeah, they
there.
were just like just wearing their like fucking it
I
does what
respect
it says
that.
on the 10, man. Like it is
Yeah.
a fighting game RPG. But like fight was a good game because it did cover like a lot of things. Like you can get like knockdowns and stuff, and then like when you knock down your opponent, it affected your initiative, right?
Yeah.
Because you're playing Street Fighter and you get a knockdown, like you get plus frames. And for people that aren't familiar with fighting games, like being plus on frames is basically an initiative bonus, right? Because your opponent has to take more time to get up, which gives you more time to do a follow-up attack, which puts your opponent at a disadvantage. And Fight was able to emulate that in a way that was pretty easy to understand, even if you weren't really good at Street Fighter or something like that, which I found fascinating. Um,
Is Tidebreaker an effects based game?
yes, absolutely. Um, but we don't really worry too much about the math and stuff. So, like,
Hmm.
if you're familiar with Besum or Mutants and Masterminds or even Thrasher, anything like that, right? They tend to have like point based systems where like
Hmm.
X costs a certain amount of points and then you gotta like add them up, or like Shadow Runs kind of like that. Um,
Yeah, I wouldn't even play Mutants and Masterminds without Hero Lab. But
yeah,
yeah,
and like Champions, like a lot of those old like '90s superheroes where it's just like, hey, you want to do like 120 points or like 400, and then just build like
yeah,
basic flight out of that. Where we're like, man, I ain't about to do all that counting. Look, you get 3 slots. They have 2 effects each. You can add more later. Go have fun. Build what you want. All right. We aren't really concerned about math affecting your heroics. Okay. So, like, you come in, you're a badass. You
yeah.
tell us why. That's it. Right. Like, we don't want to get in your way at all. Like, all we do is we put like that little limiter for where you start, and then you take that off and you go have fun. You know what I mean? That's pretty much where we stand on that, you know.
We did a stint in Mutants and Masterminds for a while. Towards I guess it was second edition at that time. Um, we had been playing 4E for a while, and then someone had invited Ted to a Heroes Unlimited game,
Mm.
and
Not familiar with that one though.
yeah, so it's Palladium, and I weaseled my way into the game, and I was like, it's fun, but I'm like, I really don't like the system. It's very like it's very wonky and unbalanced, right? So like you could be
I hear
like,
that a lot about Palladium. Palladium is, from what I understand, a really good toolbox, but a bad game.
yeah, yeah, it's they got like a lot of great ideas. They in the early days they got a lot of really good IPs. And like the early days of RPGs was like, how many tables can you cram into this game, right? And
Yeah,
charts and like that's what they do, and it's all about that. It's very much it just very much felt like that, and it's still kind of the same. So I was like, I want to play a Heroes game, but I feel like there's something better. Matter of fact, like I used to play the Marvel Superheroes game when I was a kid, and I was like, I feel like that's even a better game than this, like as
mm-hmm.
far as design. So I started poking around, and and I came across, everyone online was like Champions or Mutants and Masterminds. And
Yeah,
I was like, well, our group's familiar with D20, so that's just like that's an easier segue. So I went down that rabbit hole, and I really enjoyed it, and I enjoyed the fact that I could see like all the inspiration it took from the phase rip system.
yeah.
So so we both then we I didn't even know like they were doing a fifth edition Dungeons and Dragons. Like when we started Nerdarchy and when we were gaming, like we were playing 4E, we kind of got bored with it and moved to Mutants and Masterminds, and with that we played Heroes games, fantasy games. We did a Dresden Files game. So like it felt like you could do whatever you wanted with it. Um, and so we've done that for a while, and then when they did third edition was even better than second. Like the further the way they got away from D&D, the better that game became.
Word up. Yeah,
So
like you say like phase rip, and like I always like pronounce it like face rip because I feel like that's more metal. But
yeah, I get that.
yeah, but like the old Marvel RPGs, like I always like kind of just enjoyed them just on the premise that they're Marvel properties. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like I'm a big fan of like Cam Banks. Faces he did one of them. I can't remember which one he did. I think he did the
Cortex.
Popcorn Initiative.
He does the Cortex, and they just came out with the new system.
Yeah, but he also did a Marvel tabletop. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was based off of his Cortex.
Oh, was it? Oh,
Yeah,
sheesh.
yeah, it's based off of that system, and now like the Cortex system is a more generic. Um,
Yeah.
there's been a few of them. And I've only looked at that a little bit. I haven't actually had a chance to play it yet. Um, and we actually never really played the Marvel game as the RPG was intended. We just played it as I don't know, whatever the Wrestling Federation is, and I always say it, and they always remind me on here, and I always forget the name of it. But the Marvel Wrestling Federation. So we would just fight. That's all we really did with it. Because when we were back when I was a kid, it wasn't until like we actually did a live play on the channel a couple years back, where we did like 2 seasons of Marvel, and it just cracked me up because the game had essentially been dead for like 30 years. But it's still out there. People are still playing it. You can like download it.
I mean, you can download pretty much everything, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, in that case, like it's something that you couldn't physically buy somewhere else. I'm not a fan of pirating for sure, but in that case, it's like it's not something I don't think you can even really buy.
Yeah, pirating
Um,
is. I
but
mean, you do what you got to do to get through the day, though. Like, I'm not gonna like yell at anybody for doing it.
yeah,
Like, I would hope that you support the devs, though. Wink.
yes, yeah, yeah. Although we might be biased. So
Yeah, just a bit.
yeah,
It's just a smidge.
yeah. So when you were coming up with Tidebreaker, was there like a specific way you felt like it should be played, or in your mind the way you wanted to play it?
um, hmm. Well, yeah, yeah. I really like focusing on character arcs, like specifically. So like I was just like really big into melodrama and stuff. Because like I played a lot of like Robin Walls's Feng Shui, right? And in that game, he's very big on like saying like, hey, like this is Hong Kong cinema, ham it up, right? And I was like, yeah, let's do that. Let's go
Yeah,
ham, right? Like, just do like all the big voices and just be as corny as possible and like just be as extra as you can, right? And so like when I imagine Tiebreaker in my head, I'm just like people just like no reservations, just do the acting and like see where the story takes you, right? Um, and then beyond that, like as far as the combat goes, just do whatever looks the coolest in your head. You know what I mean? There's room for tactics and things. Like I spent a lot of time on making things not necessarily balanced per se. I think balance is a crutch, to be honest. Um, as long as a mechanic doesn't make people at the table feel bad, it's a good
yeah,
game, right? It doesn't have to be like everything feeling just kind of like on par with each other, because then you get like the bad side of 4E, right? Which that said, 4E is my favorite addition to D&D. only because I think it did the most to try to step away from what D&D was doing, which I think is probably like something that a lot of people would actually dislike that game for, but that they tried to venture away from like their comfort zone made me respect those guys as designers a little bit more. So like also I just like video games.
Yeah.
So people are like, it feels too much like World of Warcraft. I'm like, good. Like, I hate World of Warcraft, but good. Like,
Now,
it should.
it is definitely not my favorite edition, but that being said, like I agree. Like I really appreciate what they were trying to do with it, and the fact that it was different. They actually took real risks, and and the design behind it was like, can we codify this game? And also like, video games have been ripping us off for decades now. Let's take some back, right? And they used the terminology and like figured like people are like know this stuff, they're comfortable with it. Like it all made sense, right? But it's just when the rubber hit the road, people just were not vibing with it. Now I will say the thing that, that I really didn't like about it was like as I played it more, like all the different classes felt the same. Like the powers felt kind of the same and felt less unique. So it didn't feel like what I was playing really mattered nearly as much. Um, but and also though it was also like a super easy game to run from the DM, especially if you're like using the insider tools.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so there was definitely things like that I liked about it. So like pretty much like every edition of D&D, it had really good things and really bad things.
Yeah, like but like you said, like it took risks, man. So like I thought that was cool. I also liked that fighters didn't absolutely suck.
Yes, they were interesting.
Yeah, like they did things other than sit there and hit people and then sit there and hit people. Because like, yeah, you can argue that fighters in the D20 system can do things other than sit there and hit people. But like I used to hang out on like Giant in the Playground forums and stuff like that, where like all the min masters hung out.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, I'm the devil. I know. I'm sorry.
Well, I used to like to lurk on Atomic Think Tank a lot. Like that was my
yeah,
jam.
like all those little forums and stuff where people would just like post like crazy builds and stuff. But like at the end of the day, like you were pretty much wasting your turn if you didn't full attack. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like you could do interesting things, but they weren't effective, which feels bad, right? Because like you could play a spellcaster if you wanted to do interesting things and be effective, you know. So like it just kind of like made my heart hurt a little bit, like just seeing how like D&D treats like the martial classes. Because just like people are like, yeah, but it's like fantasy. You shouldn't be like good at stuff. But then like, do you read the books, dude? Like they compare you to Ku Lane, dude. Like this guy swims across the whole freaking ocean
Yeah.
while battling krakens. Like, and he like covers from like I think it was like Ireland to like the other like to England or some shit, right? Like I don't remember the legend exactly, but like, well, all I'm saying is he is swimming full speed while battling monsters and winning and not tired on the other side. Oh, also he can turn into the goddamn Hulk without any magic whatsoever, right? And that's what Dungeons and Dragons was comparing you to. But like you hear nerds online like, oh, well, I mean, like, but my fighter shouldn't be able to jump more than like 5 feet because otherwise you're a weeb. And like, I'm like, oh, well, okay. I
There
guess
is
I'll
there
play.
is like a lot of things like ritual casting and the idea that your mage character, your spellcaster, did not have to resort to using a crossbow, right? And and let's face it, the crossbow was actually an upgrade from earlier editions, right? But you were always able to use magic, and Residium was fun. The Warlord was something I would like to see come back. Uh, to 5e. 5e's done a better job, but they also took zero risks. Even though it is my favorite version of D&D, it is there was no attempt at taking a risk whatsoever. They just basically said like, what are all the things we think people liked from the previous editions,
Mm-hmm.
and threw it into a basket and been like, here's 5e. Um, from 4A Minions was a lot of fun because it did give kind of like that cinematic feel that you're talking about.
Yeah, I love that.
Introducing them to.
Like Feng Shui does that too, and Exalted does that. It's like different variations of you versus a whole bunch of dudes. Like,
Yeah.
and we covered it in Tiebreaker. But I'm gonna answer some questions in the chat real quick.
Yeah, I was getting ready to jump in there too.
Yeah. So Brian Smith asked, "How quickly can I create a character and hit the table of Tiebreaker?" Um, if it's your first time, probably like 30 minutes to an hour. Like how quickly you grasp mechanics in general will change how quickly you do the character generation. Once you've done it a few times, it takes like 5 minutes. Like you pick a couple of things from a couple of tables, and then you're done. Like beyond that, you're rolling a couple of stats, and like if you do the dice math really quickly, it's fine. You do the point bag even faster. But like character generation and Tiebreaker is pretty quick. You're not going to spend like an entire afternoon doing it. Um, Also, your other comment there. I do like your fighter idea. I would probably do that like with a different kind of character. Like, I mean, ineffective characters can be fun too. I'm not saying that your fun is wrong by any stretch of the term. Like, I am not a bad wrong fun guy. Like, I was just saying when I used to play like 3X and stuff, like I
Yeah.
liked trying to find the most effective solutions for things, and I just felt like martial classes were just really bad, but I liked hitting things with swords. So like it just kind of like broke my heart a little bit. You know what I mean?
And
But
4A changed that a little bit. Like you got to move things around, you got to have different effects, you got to feel kind of like you're like, oh, this is what the wizard feels like all the time.
yeah, exactly. Right. It's just like,
Yeah.
oh, cool. So like I spent 4 or 5 feats to be able to foot sweep somebody, where the wizard picked his class and could basically do the exact same thing.
He casts grease.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he
But he
foot
also
sweeps
does
four
it to
people.
like the entire fucking combat encounter.
Yeah.
I'm like, cool.
I,
Oh,
I totally get it.
and then later, like he can turn that into a cantrip or like the equivalent of one, right? Like with the right fee combinations, you know what I'm saying? And I'm
Yeah.
like, all right, well, I guess like I feel bad. Oh, also, and then they can pick up swords and with the right spell combinations, be better at sorting than the sword guy, which makes me, why am I even playing this? Or at least
So
like class.
has
But
Tiebreaker gotten out into the wild where other people are playing it where you're not involved in those games?
yeah, we're getting there, man. We're definitely getting there. We have 2 or 3 streams coming up.
Okay.
One of them is on Utopia on Twitter. Like they're going to be running a tiebreaker game in Kiana Estes Archon setting, which is they just came out of Kickstarter with that, and Utopia is going to be running tiebreaker on their setting, which is going to be pretty cool. And we're also going to have a stream next Saturday for I Need Diverse GMs. They're doing a charity stream using Tiebreaker. That will be on at 5:30 p.m. Eastern time, I think. Um, don't quote me on that though. I'm bad with like dates and things. um, but
But I'm
yeah,
sure it's on their Twitter, so people can probably find that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Draconiques with an S is the head of that, I believe.
Have
Yeah.
you had people come back and tell you like, I want to use your game to do this, or we're using your game to do that, in ways that kind of surprised you?
Um. Hmm. That surprised me? No, not really. But like, I've definitely heard people like give me ideas where I was just like, huh, like it's cool that they did that. But like, I kind of spent a lot of time just kind of like like pondering the different kind of scenarios that people might try to use the system for, and then
Hmm.
designing around that. So like I haven't really come across anything that has been like too out of left field yet. As far as what this the things that people do, like what surprised me the most is just people are just like, "This is a superhero game." I'm like, but it's not. I mean,
Yeah.
I guess it is. I might as well just start marketing as a goddamn superhero game.
Yeah, I guess it's like we always want to pigeonhole things into like these boxes, like just as humans, right? I guess it's our natural inclination, so I totally get that. Um, well, there's another god, there another game, something gods by Eloy de Santos, I think, or Los Santos, and I forget the name of it. But when I was like, "Oh, this is a superhero game," he's like, "Well, not really." I mean, it just like gives off those vibes, and I feel like I think when it's like, if anything that's like kind of modern, and you start talking about powers, like it just feels like that.
Yeah, it's just like modern and competence.
Yeah,
Competent PCs just automatically super. Like if it's not magic, like you're outside of fantasy at that point.
yeah.
Um,
Like City of Mist is another game where it kind of feels like that too, but I don't think it's really meant to be that.
I think
Uh,
City of Mist was explicitly superheroes though, wasn't it?
I thought
Like, I
like
mean,
City of Mist
am
was
I
like
tripping?
I haven't actually played it yet, but
Yeah, but like that was a cool looking game though. Like I followed them on Twitter like a while back. It's like fantastic comic book art.
yeah.
Kind of jealous.
Well, that's the other thing too. If like you happen to like that kind of art style and start incorporating with your game, like it's hard to not think like superheroes as well.
Yeah, yeah. You're
I
not
think.
wrong. You're definitely not wrong.
Um, yeah. So, what kind of games are you playing currently?
Well, jeez, besides my own, not much really. But
That
before I
well,
started,
that's a fair answer too. Like if like we're just doing tiebreaker and play testing, and are you
yeah,
do you consider it still like in beta, or is it done? Or are you still kind of
we're
tweaking?
we're basically just about done. Like I'm putting some final touches on it, and then everything else that goes into the game is going to be like stretch goals and stuff. But the core mechanics are have been done for a while. Like anything that gets changed in the next version is pretty much just going to be like balance updates and clarifications to some rules. Like there's some things that are in the early access edition that we caught during playtesting, like in the last couple of months, where I was just like, "Oh, geez, like how did I miss that?" Like,
Yeah.
that's what playtesting is for. Like
Well,
part of
and the more you put it in the hands of different players, the more you're going to see things.
Yeah, like I was definitely putting it out there to try to get some buzz for it so I can get more feedback, which is which has worked for the most part. Like most of the feedback has been like really positive, but like the problem with that is that like you get like mostly positive feedback like early on, and then you
Hmm.
start feeling a little bit too comfortable with where you're at. And I'm a little bit of a pessimist when it comes to those kind of things. So I'm just like, did they read it? Did they not miss like where I fucked up on that mechanic there? Like, oh, jeez, like, my game's awful. Like, no, my game's not awful. My game's fantastic. Please buy it.
Worst sales pitch ever. My game's awful.
Yeah, seriously, I'm a hell of a salesman, folks. No, but like when you're attached to things though, like you get like too close to it, and
Yes.
then like you start seeing the things in a light that's like doesn't really do it justice one way or the other. Like I might be too negative or I might be too positive based on like how close I am to the particular thing I'm looking at, right? Um, but for me, when I get too close to stuff, I start thinking like bad things about stuff, like
Yeah.
But
Are you playing Tidebreaker as a player, or are you running it?
lately I've been a player because I was for the longest time the forever GM
Yeah.
because because like when you play like non D&D stuff, you tend to just be the guy that introduces it to the group, and then you have to DM it because nobody else knows the rules. So like I was DMing Tiebreaker and like pretty much everything else I had ran by my couple of other groups that I was in for the longest. But like I've had my current group for quite some time, so like I've had some pretty good consistent playtesters, and I was like, folk, like can I play? Like I would like to play my game. And
Yeah, yeah.
they're like, yeah, I guess we're comfortable enough with the rules. Like, we'll DM for you. And I'm like, yes, because I hate DMing.
Also, I mean, I think it's really probably really helpful as a designer too to see someone else run it and see what they do with it.
Oh, absolutely. That's kind of how I fielded it. So I
Yeah,
was like, for playtesting purposes, I could stop DMing. And then people were like,
yeah.
um, I'm like, no, it's okay. It's okay. I'll kind of like sit here and,
Yeah.
I'll you if you have questions, but really, I just wanted to play.
So, has there been any of like where you have to bite your tongue where you're like it doesn't really work that way, or
Oh
like
my God, every night.
yeah,
um like at least for like the first month or two, it was just like, oh God, like did I write that poorly? I wrote that poorly. um
but that's where it's great to have someone else run it because you can go okay, like you may look at something like oh I understand why they interpret it that way now and like maybe that needs
yeah,
clarification or maybe like maybe that or maybe they did it better and maybe I need to clarify it so it is run that way.
yeah, I've had a couple of the functions in the game where one of my playtesters was just like, hey, what if you did it that way? And I was like, oh my God,
Yeah.
you're brilliant. And yeah, I definitely changed a couple of things balance wise, because some of my playtesters are like, dude, this particular function, like you could change that to be like way more awesome. So like they have been a very like great resource that I cannot like undersell like how much I value my playtesters as far as what they've been able to like.
So what is the game that you're playing in as a player?
We change our games every like week or two depending on like who shows up.
Okay.
Because like my playtesters have like jobs where they get called in like on some weeks and some weeks they don't. So but the one that I am very fond of right now is we're running an isekai game, if you're familiar with that genre of anime.
I am not.
Well,
My nerd is very narrow and specific.
yeah, like we run all kinds of shit in Tiebreaker, but
Yeah, yeah.
isekai is a genre where like the player, like the characters in the real world get pulled into something else. Like typically like isekais are like Sword Art Online, like they get pulled into a MMO or something like
Okay.
that. Um, so like we're running one of those where like it's like, hey, you're getting pulled into an MMO, but my character is a character that's getting pulled into the world of the players that is getting pulled into the MMO. So he's in a world within another world. He's complicated.
Yeah, yeah.
um, but yeah, like
It's a
that.
lot of Inception going on there.
Oh yeah, he's definitely doing this Inception thing. So like his actual body is in the MMO, but his mind is in that MMO's player's mind.
Okay.
So like he's having like conversations like with the kid that's playing. He's like, what do you mean hit point regen mechanics? Why can I not run full speed right now? Because you're clicked. I didn't click anything. Well, you clicked the thing. I mean, I guess we clicked the thing. Yeah, it leads to funny scenes.
And what is that character? Like what are their kind of attributes and what do they do?
He is. I called him a gravedigger. He's basically kind of like a cleric monk. That's like he does a little bit of summoning. He can like banish things with his suture beads and shit. Like and throws like fireballs. Like he's fun.
Nice. Does he have a shovel?
Yes, absolutely beats things to death with a shovel.
It's Yorick from League of Legends.
Hmm.
He beats things with shovels and summons stuff.
Yeah, like I kind of like imagined him looking like Papa Legba, but with a shovel, kind of,
Nice.
which was like kind of like my thing. Like, he's maybe Papa Legba with a crucifix for some reason, like because reasons.
So Brian wants to know any unique creatures specific to the Tidebreaker world.
Nope, because Tidebreaker is setting agnostic, so there is no world attached to Tidebreaker itself. Part of Tidebreaker's thing is that it is a collaborative world building engine. So whatever world that you want to build, you can build it with your table, like on the spot, right? It's kind of similar to like Fate, if you're familiar with that, where you can build the setting during the gameplay while I'm using meta currency that in Fate it's called Fate points. In Tiebreaker we use Hope and Doom, where Hope the players get to use and Doom the GM gets to use. Um, but yeah, but when you use the setting generation and you can combine it with the currency to like establish like truths within the setting. So it's like you can be like, hey, there's a cheeseburger joint across the street from here. And like if you spend the currency, it's true. Right.
Yeah.
And then the GM can do whatever they want with that. But yeah. Um no unique creatures. But on the other hand, everything's unique because you're making it.
Is that a direction you might go in the future where you maybe delve into some specific worlds or settings?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. If we do well enough on the Kickstarter, I definitely have like specific setting books planned. Um, where like I'm going to take one of the settings that our playtesters have been doing, called the Sunken District, which is basically like New York but completely underwater. Add a little bit of Eldritch horror, add some zip lines, and then go. Right. And I'm going to do that
All
with
right,
some.
that brings to mind two completely different types of places. One is everyone is like an Atlantean. The other is they're not, but like the tips of the buildings are sticking out of the water and people are ziplining across.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah, well, the first one was, and then you're like, and zip lines. I'm like, wait a minute, zip lines do not work underwater. You're just really floating at that point.
Yeah. It's New York is mostly submerged, but like because there's skyscrapers everywhere,
Mm-hmm.
like they zip line from the tops of different skyscrapers to like different parts of the boroughs or whatever.
I think if you just give it a couple years, that'll be Venice for the most part.
Yeah,
Venice is kind of sinking.
yeah, more or less, right? But that world got built out like so much, like during play.
Yeah.
I've just been keeping the notes over the last couple of months, and I was just like, dude, like we could probably sell this, and I think people would dig it. Like,
People like different and weird.
yeah, and I just thought that it would be kind of like a cool little playground to mess around in, Um, so I've been digging that. Well,
Tell me about Doom and Hope.
Doom and Hope. Yeah, like I said, it's inspired by Fate's Fate point system. There's if you're familiar with hero point systems from like I believe like Champions had one.
Mutants and
If
Masterminds has one. Force
yeah,
and Destiny and like all the Star Wars games kind of have one.
yeah, it's pretty much that. You can spend, like I said before, you can spend hope to establish facts. You can also spend it to um, change your dice roll results a little bit. Because like we have, like say D6, right? Like if you rolled a 5, you can spend one hope to push it to a 6,
Mm-hmm.
and that's important because when you're doing certain mechanics, like you can make your dice explode. Where exploding dice, like if it lands on the right number, it adds another die to your die pool, and you can spend hope to make a die that didn't explode explode. right? Um,
What
so
determines the exploding? I mean, a lot of times it's just max, but it sounds like it might be different here.
yeah, it is. So exploding dice don't happen unless you trigger what's called a showstopper. A showstopper is basically any description that makes the audience like visibly like appreciate what you're doing, like if they're clapping or laughing or whatever. It goes down to a vote, and like if the players like it enough, it becomes a showstopper. And so showstoppers by default explode on a sits, but we also have a mechanic called igniting, and igniting allows you to re-roll one of your dice. If it hits on the first level of ignite, is on sixes. On the second level, it's sixes and fives, and on the third levels, it's sixes, fives, and fours. During a showstopper, all ignited dice explode. So you can explode on a six, a five, and a four if you have ignite three, which keeps adding dice until you start failing.
Nice. The first time I encountered exploding dice was with Open Legend, and the designer had come over and like did some interviews and ran a game for us. And for a while, it was the highest roll, and it was like the D20 exploded 3 times. So it was like a 71, and it was on like an innocuous like knowledge check. That after a certain point, it's like it didn't really matter. So the GM had to struggle with figuring out like what does this uber high roll mean, in this kind of innocuous check to determine it was something like, oh, you're poisoned, and making it like more meaningful. So exploding dice are a lot of fun. I mean, I feel like as RPG players, we like to roll dice. So
That's exactly why I went with a die pool system, to be honest. So
yeah.
I was like, man, like what do people really like doing a lot in these games? And people like rolling a shit ton of dice. Which
But then, so and then it's like the trick is making it simple enough that it doesn't grind the game to a halt, or where you have to have stock in a dice company in order to play the game.
yeah, yeah. Like the die pools kind of cap out at around like 10ish. Because like I've played other die pool systems before where you end up like basically playing Warhammer,
Yeah, yeah.
build your character the right way. And I'm like, well, I like rolling a lot of dice, but like maybe that's a bit much.
Do you use a any kind of like a botch mechanic?
Yeah. It's actually called botch.
Yeah.
uh, so tiebreaker characters don't botch by default. Like something has to make them botch.
Okay.
And botch works the same way as explosions, but the opposite direction as far as like the levels go.
So like
So
you're is that tied to Doom?
yeah, a doom, you can spend doom to make something botch, but typically botching happens either from doing something that you are absolutely horrid at, or from like a curse effect or something like that. Like
Okay.
there's a lot of functions that can cause botches to happen. While you're show stopping, no, you're immune to botching. Because like you're a badass, so like we're not gonna make you botch while you're doing your really cool thing that made the table like roar in appreciation, right?
That makes sense. I mean, my issue with botches is in games like I believe Vampire was kind of known for this. It's like the better you are at doing something, the more dice you got. Well, if a one is always a
Which
botch, the
yeah,
better you are,
which
the more likely you are to get botches, right?
yeah,
So
where the math like made you suck more by being better at things, which is
yeah,
why tiebreaker characters don't botch by default, because that's what would happen. Like you'd be rolling a whole bunch of dice and then you just kind of like stink. So like making a character botch is more of a tactical choice, because
okay,
like the way I look at it, like characters that are really good at stuff happen to be particularly confident. So like
yeah,
you can go, oh, okay, well then I'll use your confidence against you by making you botch. And then like from a narrative standpoint, like it feels better to me. You know what I mean? Which is why we kind of went in that direction. But a botch and tiebreaker, like if you roll the botch, it just removes a success. It doesn't like make you fail your entire roll. Like you still have to fail the roll,
right,
like when everything's said and done. But it also happens after igniting. Um, so like you can get rid of the botch results before they trigger. Um,
okay,
so the game is very skewed towards the characters being competent. Like that's what we sell. You're hyper competent, and all of the mechanics support this to a degree. You know what I mean? Um,
And less narrative steps in, which makes a lot more sense than like random mechanics being like, oh, that thing you're really awesome at, for whatever reason you trip on your shoelace today.
yeah, like we don't do like the classic. You roll a one, and then suddenly this dude that's been spending 40 years doing the exact
Yeah.
same sword strike somehow drops his sword and then dies.
Yeah.
No, like that doesn't happen, right? Something had to make him drop his sword and kill himself on it, right?
What what determines doom and hope? Like how much doom and hope are in the game? Like in Star Wars, you roll your force and your light and dark side force pool, and it's just determining at the beginning. And when you tap into those things, you know, if you're using the light side of the force, well, every time you do that, the GM gets dark side points to use against you, and vice versa.
Yeah, like we kind of got a similar thing for Doom, where like if you use your hope, the GM gets some Doom back. But the starting amounts are 2 per player, and
Okay.
then the GM gets twice as much Doom. So yeah, so by default, like you got like 4 players, you got like 8 hope. GM's got 16 Doom to mess around with. Um, but like the GM's big bad evil guy, um, which we call the mastermind in our system,
Okay.
can actually build what's called an artifact to change how they generate Doom. So like the default assumption is they just get Doom back whenever like the players use hope, but the mastermind can use artifacts to say like, hey, like whenever I succeed at one of my plots or something, I get Doom back, right? Or whenever the players fail, so on and so forth. There's tons of options for that. But yeah, if you're not into the artifacts, then just use the Doom as standard. It works fine. Like artifacts are there for people that have been playing the game for a bit and like kind of want to do something a little different.
Does
Like
gear and equipment factor into the game? Because like I know like games like Mutants and Masterminds, there is gear and equipment, but generally it's based off of your points anyway and kind of like built into your character.
yeah, the tiebreakers abilities are representative of their gear and their martial arts, their spells, their mutant powers, or whatever you want to skin it as. So like yeah, but no.
Yeah.
We also have items, but items are basically just like consumable versions of powers for the most part. So like you can custom craft like whatever you want to like make a consumable of something. So like if you're just like, hey, I want grenades and I like counting things instead of just saying I can do it, then you can use the craft system to do that. So like there is gear, so to speak,
Yeah.
but it's mostly just hand waved as having it as part of your ability. So like if you're a dude with a gun, your gun is one of your abilities.
Okay. And like how much tracking of stuff is there in Tiebreaker?
Um, with the Hope and Doom, there's that, and then there is a pool called Momentum that each character can generate. And like you by default get momentum by missing attacks, and you can spend the momentum to do what is called a momentum shift against your opponent. Because the way the combat works is that your stats determine your die pool, but you also have an opposing stat. So, like for instance, like direct martial attacks or whatever are usually determined by your might score. And when I say usually, it's because depending on your interpretation, you can use whatever stat you want. Um, but generally speaking, might determines like hitting things really freaking hard. And that also includes like shooting them with a very big gun. So like you can be a ranged character that's
Yeah.
focused on might. But like endurance is the opposing stat for might, right? And if your opponent chooses to block something, then you roll might against their endurance. Okay. But if you've been missing because you're fighting like fucking Colossus or some shit, right? Um, you can go, well, what's his weakness? He's not very fast, so I can probably shoot him in the eyeball if I can get him to like not block his face for a little bit or something. And that's how momentum shifts work. Like you get enough momentum, you tell Colossus, no, we're going to be rolling my might versus your focus, with focus being the thing that you use to dodge agility, which is more of like the speed and precision stat. And then you go, well, suck my bullet right into your face hole.
How many stats are there?
It's there's three pairs. So you have might and endurance, agility and focus, and wits and intuition. And then
And
there's a couple of like secondary stats, but you have the main six, and your secondary stats are your critical and your recovery. And then there's like the aforementioned momentum and power level, which is just a bonus to like most of the things that you do. Every character starts at 2, and you add that to your dice pool. But critical and recovery are just like the combinations of your offensive stats for critical and your defensive stats for recovery. Where critical determines if you get critical hit or not, based on if a number of successes that get rolled against it. And recovery is like you roll against that to see if you can get up when you counterattack people.
so, is it like a opposed rolling system, or is it like static defenses?
Static defenses. Because like I said, like if you're rolling might, you use might to determine your die pool against your opponent's endurance, which is a static number. So like if you had like 4 endurance, the target number is 4.
Okay, so 4 successes.
Yes.
Okay, and what is like the range?
The range is 1 to 5.
Okay,
So that way, like I said, because you have 2 in your power level to begin with, like bare minimum, like no effort, don't do anything with your character like whatsoever, you can have at least 3 in your die pool, which means you can hit at least 3 with no investment, right?
right.
Like whatsoever.
But if they have a 4 endurance, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, if they have a 4 endurance,
You need something really cool to happen to have a chance.
yeah, you have to like have built your character at that point.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? Like invest in something, or get a showstopper. Like showstoppers change it so that like, hey, like if my dice explode enough, then I can hit whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and I think that's cool because if you come up with an idea that's so cool, your character is able to do something that maybe they wouldn't normally be able to do. Like it's pretty much like anytime anyone ever fights the Juggernaut, right? They
Yeah,
need a
yeah.
showstopper to have a
The
chance.
Juggernaut is only vulnerable to showstoppers.
Yeah, yeah.
That's canon now, y'all.
It makes sense to me, right? Because you need like someone needs to get his helmet off so someone else can mind blast him or mind control him. That's it. Nothing else works. At least the last time I read comics, it's been a while.
Yeah, that's how I remember it too. But yeah, so the other thing is like when you do stunts in Tiebreaker, stunts being any description other than like I do the thing,
Right.
right? So like you can't be like I swing my sword and get a stunt out of it. Like you have to describe it. Like if you're like I jump up and swing my sword, that's enough. And for that you get one more die. So like I said, that character that put his might at like 1 for whatever reason,
Yeah.
with a stunt, he can get 4 dice, right? So he has a chance of hitting almost anything.
I
Uh,
like that.
yeah,
Could
and with one function, most of the offense functions, for some reason or another, will give you another die. Like the easiest one is element, which just like, hey, my sword's on fire, and what do you get out of that? You get another die.
yeah.
So like you do a stunt with your flaming sword, so now you have a jumping flaming slash. You get 5 dice out of that. So like you have a chance of hitting that dude with 5 endurance. Like it's not a great chance, but like you're in that fight. You know what I mean?
No, I like that because so many times, like in your D&D style game, you get a new player and they're like, "I want to try this thing," and like the rules don't really support that thing. So either as a GM, you have to be experienced enough to handle it on the fly and reward them for trying something cool, or you can default to, oh, well, it doesn't really work that way, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, like, I want to slash at the enemy's eyes with my dagger. It doesn't mean anything in D&D, right? Because you're always trying to slash at their eyes or their throat or whatever. Or
Yeah,
like I had a player in game go, I want to pole vault off of my glaive and drop kick them, right? And
yeah,
there's nothing effective or good about that in a D&D game. So I had to make something up in order to make it viable and useful for them, right?
yeah.
And
Tiebreaker.
reward them for coming up with something and not just saying I want to stab it.
We're
You know.
definitely very much focused on like, hey, if you want to pole vault kick somebody in the head,
Uh,
cool. Get some extra dice, bare minimum.
yeah.
Uh, and if it's cool enough, you also get a showstopper. But wait, there's more. So the other thing that we can do in Tiebreaker that makes us a little bit different from similar systems is that when you have a cool trick like that, you get just that, a trick. And tricks are what we do, where what we call our system of getting extra functions on the fly. So like if you said, hey, I want to pole vault kick this guy, but can I get something else out of that, right? Because you're always going to get a player that can be like, well, I mean, can I count as having haste or something for doing this like chandelier swing or something like
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
In D&D, like unless you're a really generous GM, like you're probably going to say no, right? Because like there's nothing that supports that. In Tiebreaker, we go, fuck yeah, you can.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like hell yeah, get launched. Like count yourself as flying. Like go have fun.
Yeah.
Or if you do it like with a running start or something, add launch and hyper. Like just go for it. Well, I mean, I wouldn't give you two functions because like every time you do a trick, you get one, right?
Right.
Because like a lot of action movie heroes, they tend to pull stuff out of their ass, like to win their fights, right? Um, like you watch like a lot of anime, the kid always has like a new fucking technique every time he fights the big bad guy,
Yeah.
and like you didn't see him train to get it, but somehow like his Kamehameha can now bounce off walls. Why? Because it's fucking cool, and like, and I am very, very much a proponent for supporting cool. Like we play these games that have fun for the most part. Like people might play them for immersion or just general escapism or whatever. But I personally, I play games that have fun. Okay, so
Makes sense.
yeah, so our trick system, it's like, hey man, if you want to bounce your bullets off of the wall, cool, get your bonuses, and like if you want, here, have another function. And that's our main progression system too. Like the more cool stuff you do, the more cool stuff you get. You know?
Now, I feel like it also is open up for that player who doesn't actually care about the cool stuff as much as they care about getting more dice
Yeah,
to roll.
let him have fun too. Like the way I look at it, man, like you're gonna have people that are just there for cool stories, and you're gonna have people that want cool builds. Tiebreaker supports both, right? And as a GM, you might be going, "Holy crap!" But like my min master friend is going to build like the most ridiculous thing in the world, and like I don't know how to handle that. I mean, that's what you got Doom for, buddy. Like if you feel like that min master character is going out of control, like you can slap him down with some Doom every once in a while if you need to. But the other thing is that we have momentum shifts for if his defense is too strong. You know what I'm saying? A lot of our functions have a choice mechanic. So, like, you can shut down certain abilities, right? So you can say, hey, you've been min-maxing the shit out of your A ability because, like, tiebreaker characters have 3 slots, right? So, like, you can stop that for a little bit. Not as bad as, like, saying doing a hold person on somebody for a round,
Yeah.
but, like, it adds a level of tactical depth to the game, right? So like one of the things is shutting it down completely. The other thing is getting a free counter attack. So like you get an attack of opportunity wherever you do this A ability. So maybe try your B or C or something like that. There's abilities to do escapes. So like you can teleport around, you can dash away from things. Like there's an answer to every situation that you can be in Tiebreaker. It doesn't always come down to the dice. Like dice definitely influence things,
Mm.
but like the best tiebreaker player is going to be the one that's the most creative. Right. So if you're a good GM and you know the rule set, like nothing your players do is going to completely break the game.
And are you more of a maps and mini kind of guy or a theater of the mind?
It depends on who I'm playing with. Like, if I'm playing with people that want to play the game for more of the things that I just described, like having that like tactical counterplay thing,
Yeah, yeah.
where it's just like, oh, I know he's got this and this kind of ability, so I'm gonna hit him with this ability instead. Like, right, like then I'm gonna use minis. But like if I'm just playing with people that are just like, hey, like I want to like blow this car up, like does it kill all the mooks in the area? Yeah, we'll do theater of mind. Like it's just more of like how much mental load I have to put on myself,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, absolutely. We kind of do like we usually do like kind of like a hybrid, and then also it depends on the medium that we're playing in as well. I mean, obviously the last past year, most of it's been, all of it, which has been online. Um,
Yeah, like I just use Google Draw for the most part.
nice.
Like they have is it called Draw? I don't remember. Might be Sheets or something. But one of the Google things like lets you like draw on the thing, and
Yeah.
it's a little like you get like a little laser pointer, and there's like post-it notes. I just use those.
Yeah, I mean, I've been doing a lot of like where I'll just screen share a map and use the annotations from Zoom,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and
I do it
like
on Discord.
and move
That,
stuff
that
around
lets
that
you
way.
do
So, yeah, I mean, there's definitely tons of ways, but we are just past the hour mark. Final thoughts before we head on out?
that. Well, I mean, I'm glad for the people that like came through and hung out with us today. Like I really appreciate y'all. Like y'all are great. I hope you enjoyed the time that you spent with us today. If you like what you've heard today, like you can pick up the game at tiebreakerrpg.com. Our Kickstarter is going to be on the 22nd. I hope to see you around. And if you want to talk to me, I am at Follow My Blade on Twitter. Links to the Discord are in my bio. And hope to see y'all soon.
And as always, we got some links in the description for you to click and go stalk Nick Butler throughout the interwebs, but in the good way. And until next time, stay nerdy.
Word.